The most dangerous part? You know, it was...
During a flight, I mean, is it when you're at top speed? Is it when you're taking off? Is it when you're landing?
It's an airplane. All airplanes are unforgiving. They're just pieces of steel, you know? So you need to... They always know when you're not paying attention somehow. I'm not sure how, but they do. But in the SR71, I'd say when you're flying at altitude, speeding, when you're at 85,000 feet, and you're flying at 3.2 Mach, and you're all of a sudden in a 45-degree turn, which is pretty steep at that altitude, yeah, a lot can go wrong. So we were always pretty much, you know, waiting for that other shoe to drop.
I was wondering because, you know, when you're on a commercial flight, they're always like, well, takeoff and landing is the most dangerous part. But I thought for something living on the edge like this,
takeoff and landings always can be tricky, but this SR71 to me, now I'd flown F4. I came from Vietnam flying F4s, and the SR71 is not a hard airplane to fly. It flies in a different regime, and in the regime it flies in, it makes it more difficult. But just like flying it, it's not a hard airplane to fly. Now, we didn't do anything in this airplane like, we didn't do barrel rolls or lazy eights or maneuvers like that. We just flew operational missions, yeah.
Okay. All Blackbirds were unarmed?
Unarmed. They're all just reconnaissance. Just reconnaissance. So they had no offensive weapons, no guns, missiles, bombs, and no defensive weapons, which would mean like we didn't have chaff or flares or anything like that that would shoot out to try to spoof a missile or a radar site. We did everything electronically.
You were not afraid to be, you know, shut down?
No. It was a hard airplane to track, and like I told another group, we were all 28, 29 years old, so we didn't figure anybody could shoot us.
Okay. Yeah, it was really...
That's right, invincible. Wasn't going to happen.
When you were at cruise, what was the difference between your stall speed and your...
Oh, there was no... We never really had to worry about that. No. What you had to worry about in this airplane, if you were at altitude, if you were in a high bank turn, and you had an engine problem in the low engine or something, and then the nose got low, and you rolled out, and now you're in a high-speed kind of dive situation. Getting the nose back up wasn't easy because you could overstress the airplane, and you could put too much angle of attack on the airplane, even going fast, getting it up. Yeah. So we had a stick shaker and a pusher, and I've had that happen a few times where you're trying to get the nose up, and the stick it's doing this, it's pushing it down, you know. So you had to just kind of work it up to level flight again. But it wasn't horrible. It's just you had to be aware of it.
And how often did you experience an unstart?
Many times.
Really?
And usually experienced unstarts like an engine inlet issue. On training missions, a lot out of deal. On operational missions, less, for whatever reason.
Yeah, lose an engine. Was that the question?
It's an engine inlet. All jet engines, and a lot of people don't realize this, but all jet engines, no matter what airplane it is, whether it's an SR71 going Mach 3, or an F4, an F16, F22, whatever it is, jet engines can only take subsonic air. So when you're going faster than the speed of sound, I'm not an engineer, so in pilot talk, you have to trick the engine into thinking you're going subsonic. All engines are that way, all jet engines. Rockets can go supersonic, jet engines can't. So you have to trick the engine. The way we did it in the SR71 was with these spikes out front here. That spike is full forward right now. At 1.6 Mach, that spike would unlock, both of them on either side, and they would start moving aft 1 5/8 inch every 10th of a Mach number while you were accelerating. Okay, and what it did was it captured the supersonic shock wave, and it would bring it back into the engine nacelle. That's called the nacelle area, all around it in there, but it would keep it forward of the engine itself, and then the supersonic air would be routed around the engine, and subsonic air would go into the engine. The supersonic air would come back in again at the back end of the engine. This is a real oversimplification. It would relight again, and it would become like a ramjet kind of a situation. That whole process is called the engine inlet combination, because you had the engine, and then you had that inlet, which was the spike, and some doors that were sending air and all around the engine. That was the air inlet. Whenever that shock wave on here, or one of the doors malfunctioned, sending air around it, and air wasn't going around it, you'd have what you called an unstart. And the reason they called it this is because if it was working well, that inlet combination was called started. It was a started inlet. I don't know who named that, but that's what it was called. So when it malfunctioned, it was called an unstart. And what would happen is it would spit the spike out the front to recapture the supersonic shock wave. The doors would start trying to work again. The airplane throwing the spike out the front, going 2,100 miles an hour, was like opening a barn door. So the airplane would have a tremendous amount of yaw, altitude and all, and that'd be magnified if you were to turn. That's why I say if it was on the lower engine, you'd roll in. If it had an unstart and that barn door came out down here, you'd go like that. So you had to be real careful. That was an unstart. So then your question was, how many times do we have it? I had quite a few in training. We would make them happen in the trainer for the new pilots, so they would get to see them, so they didn't happen the first time when they were by themselves. But I mean, I had plenty.
Wow.
Plenty of them. Now, most of them happen during the climb and descent because all the air's changing and the air pressure's changing, temperature's changing, everything's changing. Airplanes accelerating, airplanes decelerating. When it really would scare you is if you were leveled off and you were leveled off for 15 or 20 minutes, the airplane's flying well, you're just flying along and all of a sudden, boom, one engine would one inlet would unstart and that spike would go forward, like the barn door would open up and the airplane would go, whoop. So that would scare you because you weren't ready for it as much then. You were kind of ready for it during the climb.
A wake-up call.
It was a wake-up call, yeah.
How long did you fly? How long did you fly?
I flew, I was a pilot from, I started in January 1974 through the summer of 1980. I've got over 900 hours as a pilot in the SR during that time. So I was one of the high-time guys, or one of the younger guys to get in. The fly would run down. So it was a long time, yeah. But that's all we did when we flew the SR. There were 12 or 14 crews at a time, and we had 2 bases to deploy to, so we'd be home for a while, and then I'd go to Okinawa for 6 weeks. I'd come home for 6-7 weeks, then I'd go to England for 4 weeks, come home for a few weeks, I'd go to Okinawa for 6 weeks. Did that for 6 years, yeah. So we had, and then we had one time I was telling a group earlier, which you talk about messing up, that's called a rotation, a TDY rotation. So we only had 12 or 14 pilots we rotate.
Very nice.
One day at Beale Air Force Base, 2 of our pilots were hit by the same car jogging. Same hit and run driver hit 2 guys out jogging. They both lived, they both came back to fly again, but they were in the hospital for a long time. Messed up the crew rotation big time. We'd go to the hospital and visit them, say, get better. But they both came back and flew, but it was months and months. But yeah, when you have 12 or 14 guys flying a rotation like that, and 2 of them disappear the same day, it makes a big difference.
What kind of training did you
12, yes, sir.
Did you ever fly the 2-seater?
Yes, the 2-seater was a trainer. I was an instructor and evaluator, so I checked out in the 2-seater, then I was an instructor in the 2-seater and an evaluator in the 2-seeter. That's why I said in the 2-seater now you can't see each other, 2 pilots. You're always flying with another pilot. That's where you have to be careful when you hear the other pilot say, watch this, because you know.
How often did you get shot at?
We were told they shot over 2,000 missiles at the SR71 over the course of a lot of years. Out of Vietnam, North Korea, Cuba.
1,000 missiles.
I never saw one. I got indications a lot in the cockpit of a missile launch.
Okay.
Never saw a missile.
How you feel?
That was our second step. You'll get a kick out of this. At 80,000 feet, our rule, every airplane has a rule of engagement, ROE, what you're supposed to do. When we're flying this airplane, if you went through the sequence of a missile, you fly it and you get a light in the cockpit that says they know you're in the area. You get another light that says there's a missile site or something, a radar locked on. Then you get another light that says there's a launch. Doesn't mean there has to be a launch, but for simplicity purpose, let's say there's a launch. Once you go through that and you see that there's a launch, our first step was to push the power up and accelerate to maximum Mach. The second step then was to look outside and see if you saw a missile. That was in the checklist. Power up, look for a missile. We'd look outside, see if we, and then the third step, whether we saw a missile or didn't see a missile, was just to stay on course and not do another thing. Not do another thing. They figured you stood a better chance killing yourself and losing the airplane trying to juke a missile, and you really have no depth perception up there. So we didn't abort missions or anything because we were shot at. or thought we were shot at.
Step 3, do
Even
nothing.
if you saw
Do
them.
nothing.